What's up, everybody? Welcome to Paiper Zombie Productions, home of the original ZTV. I am Paiper Zombie, your host as always, and for today's episode, we're going to be checking out the 1986 horror comedy known as House. So without further delay, let's get into it. House opens ominously enough as a delivery boy rides up on his scooter. Remember when those were all the rage? To deliver groceries to a rather nice-looking and well-kept two-story estate. When he knocks on the door, it slowly creaks open as if someone didn't shut it all the way. Even this boy knows that this is exactly how some mess gets started off in a horror movie. But this is reality, so he goes inside the house, calling to Mrs. Hooper, the lady who lives there, to let her know he's there with her groceries. When his only response is the eerie silence of the house, Delivery boy decides that he's about through with this situation and tells Mrs. Hooper that he's going to leave her groceries on the table. That's when he finally gets an answer, a thumping sound from upstairs. Now, had the boy been smart, it would have cut back to his scene and the only thing that would have still been in the shot was the bag of groceries on the table, because he should have been gone. He did what he was supposed to do. He left the groceries. He told Miss Hooper that they were down there. And when she gets done what she's doing or whatever, she'll come on down and get them, right? Of course, Delivery Boy is not smart and takes his silly ass on upstairs to investigate. He finds nothing out of the ordinary in the first room he checks, but hears the thumping sound again as he's checking that first room. He follows the direction of the sound further down the hallway to another room. Stepping inside, the delivery boy sees nothing out of the ordinary. Then he looks over in the other direction and sees what the source of the thumping sound is. Mrs. Hooper has hung herself. The thumping sound is the sound of her feet hitting the dresser as her body swings back and forth. Now, how would you react if you showed up to deliver groceries and found your customer hanging from the ceiling? You'd probably get the hell out of the house, get on your scooter, shift that straight into fourth gear, and blaze a trail out of there without so much as a call to 911. Yeah, Delivery Boy is smart after all. We then cut suddenly to a graveyard with rain in progress where a funeral service is being held. The service is for Mrs. Hooper, but there are only 3 people plus the priest in attendance. The older gentleman speaks to the younger one beside him. The younger gentleman is Roger Cobb, played by William Catt, and the older gentleman tells him that this wasn't like Elizabeth, which is Mrs. Hooper's first name, to go off and do what she did to herself. She was a good woman and not crazy. We also learn that Elizabeth is Roger's aunt. Roger accepts the words while Elizabeth's coffin is lowered into the ground. We then cut suddenly to, yes, there's a lot of that in this film, to this. Now, I don't know about you, but that would scare the hell out of me. This is a fan of Roger's, of whom we find out is a best-selling novelist. Roger is out promoting his new book, Blood Dance, by doing a book signing at the local bookstore. And Roger finds out that he's got some very colorful supporters as he does the signing. One of his supporters asks the question of when they can expect new material from Roger and what that new material might be about. Roger explains that his next book will be about his personal experiences in the Vietnam War. It's not the answer that the supporter was hoping to get, and he tries to hide his disappointment. Another fan further back in the line asks Roger if he's married to a woman named Sandy Sinclair. Roger answers that he was, but that the two of them are now divorced. We move on to later, after the signing is done, where Roger and his agent, Frank, are walking and discussing plans for the future. Frank reminds Roger that it's been over a year since Blood Dance was released, and emphasizes that his fans are hungry for more of his horror stories, not a story about the Vietnam War. On top of this, Frank warns that if Roger doesn't have a new book on his desk by the end of the month, that Roger will have to pay back his advance to the book publishers. But Roger defends his decision to write the book about his experiences in the war and apologizes to Frank for taking so long with the work. But he feels like it's something he has to do and really wants to go forward with it. We assume Frank agrees because we cut to even later that day where Roger is at home in front of his computer. Yeah, check that thing out. Remember when that was a computer? And check out that stunning color graphics adapter display. 4K? No way. Why don't you try 4B, baby? In any case, the writer's bug isn't biting, but something else is. Roger turns off the computer and goes over to get his phone book. Yes, my younger viewers, There was a long period of time back in the day when you actually had to write down all of your contacts into a book and carry it with you. Roger looks up the number and dials. It links him to the FBI, where he asks for Agent Thatcher. When Agent Thatcher gets on the line, Roger asks him if he's heard anything. Agent Thatcher replies that unfortunately he hasn't had any new leads coming in concerning Roger's son, who's been missing for a never-told-to-us amount of time. Roger is of course disappointed that there are no new leads, and Agent Thatcher assures Roger that as soon as he hears something, he will call. No sooner than Roger puts down the phone from speaking with Agent Thatcher does it ring again. He grabs the phone, but before he answers, he turns on the stereo and pumps up the volume. On the other side of the line is the person that one of Roger's fans was asking about earlier, Sandy Sinclair, Roger's ex-wife, who is played by Kay Lentz. The reason for Sandy's call is because she got Roger's message about his Aunt Elizabeth's passing and she wanted to give her condolences. However, it's very hard for her to have a conversation with Roger. She is an actress after all and is currently at an award show. Shortly after she starts talking to Roger, everyone around her suddenly decides they want her attention. Roger can hear this commotion on his end and is a little bit jealous that Sandy is surrounded by real action while he's surrounded by fake action. You see, the reason for his turning on the stereo was so that he could pretend that he was having a poker party with some friends at his house. It's a lie that Roger turns to, telling Sandy that he's holding up the game and that he should really get back to it. Sandy looks like she's heard this line 1,000 times before and starts to say something to Roger before she tells him forget it and tells him goodbye. Much later that night, Roger is in the middle of a very uneasy sleep. He's dreaming of what looks like a forest. He travels through it and arrives at a small clearing where a young boy is playing with a toy right next to an old-school marked graveyard. Suddenly, a gruesome, decaying hand bursts out of the grave and reaches for the boy. Roger awakens from the nightmare in terror. Whatever the nightmare has put on his mind sends him to the closet for his suitcase, which he packs on the spot. We cut to the next day and meet Roger as he's pulling up to his aunt's old house. The estate's attorney, a man named Mr. Parker, is also present. The two shake hands and exchange pleasantries before stepping into the house. As the two men journey through the house, we find out that Roger actually grew up in the place. After his mother passed, his Aunt Elizabeth and uncle raised him. We never find out what the uncle's name is, though. The two men step outside of the house and over to the pool, which Mr. Parker states was just cleaned. But Roger doesn't hear him. His mind flashes back to an unknown time where he's trimming the trees with a pair of hedge clippers. A young boy, the same one from Roger's nightmare, plays with his toy cars nearby. Roger calls to the boy, whose name is Jimmy, but Jimmy doesn't respond. When Roger looks to see why, he sees that it's because Jimmy is gone. Concerned but not worried, Roger goes in search of the boy. It leads him around to the front of the house where he hears the sound of a vehicle starting up its engine. Roger makes it to the edge of the street just in time to see a car taking off at top speed and going around the corner. Now the worry kicks in. Roger goes back to the house calling for Sandy. She comes out through the front door and asks what's going on. Roger asks her if Jimmy is in the house with her, but she replies that he's not. Roger rushes back to the backyard while Sandy rushes inside to call the police. As Roger makes it to the backyard near the pool, he finds that the pool gate is open and that Jimmy is inside the pool. But he doesn't appear to be swimming, he appears to be struggling. Roger immediately runs and jumps into the pool, but once he's in the pool, he sees no sign of his son. Roger surfaces and dives again, but nothing changes. It's as if Jimmy disappeared the moment he jumped in to save him. Mr. Parker snaps Roger back from his flashback, asking him if he's okay. Lying, Roger says he's fine, and the two men go on with their walk. It leads them into the garage, which has been turned into a makeshift painting room by Elizabeth. A painting that Mr. Parker thinks Elizabeth was working on before her passing is present. Both he and Roger take a look at it. While Mr. Parker says it gives him the creeps, Roger points out that it's a painting of the closet in his aunt's bedroom. Mr. Parker points out that it's also the same room where Elizabeth hung herself. Roger goes one further and reveals that his Aunt Elizabeth thought that her house was haunted. Mr. Parker thinks Roger is kidding, but isn't sure. After stepping back into the house, Roger's attention is taken by a picture of him, Sandy, and Jimmy. It provokes another flashback. It's the aftermath of Jimmy's disappearance. The police have come to the house and are just finishing with taking the report. After Roger gives his statement, his Aunt Elizabeth gives hers. She says it was the house that took Jimmy. The detective taking the report just nods and smiles. Elizabeth makes her statement to Roger and Sandy, but Sandy is not in the mood. She's like,
"Will you shut up? Will you shut up just for once, you old bat?"
And on that note, Sandy runs out of the room in a huff. And Aunt Elizabeth is like,
"Touchy."
Roger returns from the flashback and lets Mr. Parker know that he doesn't intend on selling his aunt's house. Instead, he'd like to stay in the house himself for a while. He thinks it might help him with his work on his long-gestating book. While Mr. Parker hopes that Roger will reconsider, he accepts the decision. I'm not sure if it's later that day or if it's on another night entirely, but Roger eventually moves into his aunt's house and, as you can see, has still made zero progress on his book. Unable to get motivated, Roger steps away from the computer and begins examining the things in the room around him. This is the room that his uncle kept all of his trophies in. Of course, Roger is silly enough to reach out and touch this one and finds out that sharp teeth are still sharp even if the creature is dead and skinned. Roger is tending to the wound like a true medical professional when he hears a sound that catches his attention. The sound came from upstairs. Roger goes up. It leads him to the same room where the delivery boy made his grisly discovery. However, what Roger sees inside isn't grisly. It's more shocking. His Aunt Elizabeth is standing in the room, seemingly alive and well. She speaks to Roger, telling him that although she didn't think it could, the house won. It tricked her. As she makes her way to the bed with Roger wondering what the hell is going on, she warns him that the house is going to try to trick him too. Since he grew up in it, it knows everything about him. As Elizabeth puts the noose around her neck and tightens it, she utters one final warning for Roger to leave the house while he can. She then jumps. Roger runs in to catch her, but Elizabeth's body evaporates into thin air, leaving him with nothing to catch. After going through every single room and turning every single light on in the house, Roger hits the bathroom medicine cabinet for drugs. Can you guess which one of these he's going to take? Bingo! Nah, he doesn't wind up taking it though, and instead puts it back before heading off to bed for the night. The next morning, Roger takes out the trash and spots one of his neighbors as she jogs by. The two say hi to one another as the jogger passes by and goes on to her house. Before she goes in though, she turns around and gives Roger that secret look. And Roger is like, and he isn't the only one. Roger's next door neighbor, who just happens to be outside watering his bushes, makes his presence known to Roger by remarking on the jogger's beauty. This is Harold, played by George Wendt, and he comes over to get better acquainted with Roger. Harold thinks Roger is a brand new neighbor, and he's like,
"Woman lived here before you was nuts. Biggest bitch under the sun. Just a senile old hag, really. Wouldn't be surprised if someone just got fed up and offed her, you know what I mean?"
When Roger tells Harold that the woman he's currently railing on is his aunt, Harold is like,
Heart of gold, though. Just a saint, really. And such a beautiful woman for her age.
To further apologize, Harold invites Roger over for dinner, thinking that he has a family. After finding out that Roger is alone, Harold switches up his invite to a burger and watching the ball game. Trying not to be rude, Roger tells Harold that he's come to stay at his aunt's house because he's working on a new book and was looking for a little solitude to do it in. It becomes very clear that Harold does not know solitude. However, hearing that Roger is a writer connects the dots for Harold, and he realizes who Roger is. Confessing that he's Roger's biggest fan, he takes out a book that he's been keeping in his pocket out for Roger to sign. Unfortunately, all of the book parts are missing from the book and it's just pages. He asks Roger if he will autograph the book, but when neither man has a pen, Roger suggests that they do it later, but he isn't specific as to when later is. Once later does roll around, Roger is actually back in front of his computer writing out the first chapter of his book. We get to see what it is that he's writing via flashback. Roger and the troop that he's a part of are in the process of traveling between bases. Roger is trying to light a cigarette while his troop leader goes over their orders and realizes that it's broken and isn't smokable. He asks his friend Ben, played by Richard Mall, for a spare smoke. Ben hands Roger his tin with his cigarettes in them and a little something extra. Roger freaks and throws the tin immediately while Ben laughs. But Ben's little trick turns out to have further repercussions as moments later, Ben thinks he hears something or someone creeping around in the jungle nearby. When a grenade suddenly rolls into view, Ben sees it and screams for his troop to get down. The blast misses the troops, but enemy soldiers emerge and begin firing on them. Roger fires back, taking out a target. Ben fires too, taking out multiple enemy targets. And the man loves doing it too. The noise from the television starts to break Roger's concentration, so he turns it off. He settles back in to work when he hears laughter. Childish laughter. When he looks back at the television to see if maybe he didn't turn it off, he sees Jimmy at the window. He's the source of the laughter. Now, a whole lot of things should be going through Roger's mind right about now, and they probably are. But what we're supposed to think is that his mind remembers what the spirit of his aunt said before, that the house is trying to trick him. So picking up the remote and clicking it, Roger literally turns his son off. As soon as that happens, Roger hears the sound of Jimmy's laughter from upstairs. So he does what anyone else in the house that we can now officially call haunted would do. He goes to look. Guess which room he goes up to look in? Yep, but Aunt Elizabeth isn't present this time. There's just a room, accessories, and nothing else. Remembering what he saw in his aunt's painting earlier when he was with Mr. Parker, Roger goes over to the closet door. But before he opens it, he realizes that he must be tripping and leaves instead. The idea, however, doesn't leave Roger's mind, and later, as he's brushing his teeth, he finds himself going back into the room, to the closet, and opening the door. The lamp in this picture is scarier than what's in that closet, unless anyone here has hanger or basket phobia. Roger closes the closet door and gets ready to leave. On his way out, though, the clock downstairs signals that the time is now 12 in the morning. Remembering what he saw in his aunt's painting in regards to the clock being at 12, Roger returns to the closet and opens it. He's expecting hangers and a basket again, but instead he gets this. Yeah, that's enough for one night. Cut to the next day. No, this is not an ad for Nokia. Roger has gone out and bought a truckload of cameras, both video and film. Oh yeah, he's gonna catch this beast on video, in picture, on Etch-a-Sketch, whatever it is that he has to. So when the clock strikes 12 midnight, he rushes upstairs, gets everything ready, and prepares to make history. Remember Harold, Roger's next door neighbor? Apparently showing up at a friend's house at midnight with food and liquor and letting themselves in is a thing with him because that's exactly what he does. It scares the beer juice out of Roger, who doesn't even ask how Harold got in, and instead takes him downstairs to, well, eat and drink. During the eating and drinking, Roger tells Harold about the monster in the closet. When Harold doesn't believe him, Roger shows him proof. Harold thinks that maybe Roger might be going a little bit crazy and casually takes his leave. On the way out, though, he swipes Roger's phone book, which is conveniently sitting on the table. As soon as he gets home, Harold uses Roger's phone book to contact Sandy. He tells her that he's concerned about Roger and thinks that he might be having PTSD flashbacks. This, of course, concerns Sandy, and she gives Harold her daytime phone number since she can't just put off the show she's on, and she asks to be kept updated. Harold assures her that he will keep an eye on Roger and let her know if anything further happens. But Sandy doesn't just take Harold's word for it. Once that call is over, she dials the number to Roger's aunt's house to speak to Roger himself. Roger doesn't hear the phone ringing. He's back in front of his computer in the zone and writing. In the flashback, Roger and Ben are sent out on point. We only make it this far through this flashback because the rest of it is too intense for Roger to handle. He gets up and takes a break from his work. As soon as he does, he sees Jimmy's toy car come rolling into the entryway. Roger almost bites the bait, but remembers his aunt's warning about the house playing tricks on him. As Roger comes back into his uncle's trophy room, he thinks he sees the taxidermied swordfish on the wall move just slightly. When he examines it up close, he doesn't see any movement, but as soon as he walks away... Since the fish is taxidermied, Roger can hear the sound the eye makes when it moves, so when he turns back to look at the swordfish again, it suddenly comes to life and begins thrashing wildly against the wall. When beating it about the head with one of his uncle's statue trophies doesn't knock it out, Roger runs out to the garage to grab the shotgun and load it up for use. Right as he's about to go back into the house and finish off the fish, he hears what he thinks is the sound of hedge clippers snipping. Roger looks just in time to see a row of inanimate garden tools suddenly become animate, floating Ouija tools. They advance menacingly, with Ouija axe trying to take out Roger but missing. Roger hightails it out of the garage before the rest of the Ouija tools can attack and closes them inside the garage. Getting back into the house, Roger loads the shotgun and fills the thrashing swordfish with buckshot. The swordfish screeches in agony and slowly perishes. For real this time. Roger gets a red towel from the bathroom and throws it over the swordfish's head. Moments later, Roger finishes washing his face in the sink in the bathroom. He decides that tonight is definitely going to be the night to have that Valium, but harsh knocks on the bathroom door cause him to spill all the pills into the sink. Not sure who or what is going to be on the other end of the door, Roger grabs his shotgun and opens the door. The Ouija tools from the garage have made their way into the house, and they must all be female because ladies are the ones who like to travel to the bathroom in groups. But these ladies aren't here because they all had too much to drink and now they gotta go TT. Ouija Shovel makes that very clear as it lurches threateningly at Roger before charging him. Roger uses his shotgun to parry the attack, which breaks Ouija Shovel's spaded head off. Roger is able to evade the other Ouija tools in the commotion and close them up once again in the room. As he comes back downstairs, we see that daytime has happened all of a sudden, and a new guest is present in the house. Sandy, worried by Harold's call, has come to the house to see if Roger is okay. Roger lies when Sandy questions him about the shotgun he's holding. When he sets the shotgun on the table, one of the bullets rolls away from the gun and directly towards Sandy before it falls off the table. Sandy gives Roger that "why are you lying to me" look before she bends down to pick the bullet up. But when she stands back up, this queen goes from looking hot to very freaking not. But she doesn't let ugliness stop her. She beans Roger in the head, which makes him fall back against the stairs before she moves in to give him a kiss he'll never forget. Roger is able to grab his shotgun though and fires 2 shots into Garbage Pail Sandy, blasting her right out of the front door. The sound of the shotgun blast wakes a sleeping Harold next door. After looking out of his window and seeing Roger standing on the porch with his shotgun, Harold takes no chances and calls the police. Back at Roger's place, Roger makes a horrible discovery when he goes to check the body. It's not that of a grotesque humanoid creature. It's that of his ex-wife. Wondering if the house has tricked him into killing Sandy, Roger mourns over her. But the moment isn't long. The sound of approaching sirens tells Roger that the police are on their way. Thinking fast, Roger stashes Sandy's body in the downstairs closet before going back out to the front porch with his shotgun and pretending to clean it. Luckily, the police buy his excuse that he was cleaning the gun and that it accidentally went off. Unluckily, 2 of the officers recognize who Roger is and reveal that they're fans of his work. One of them asks if he could trouble Roger to use the restroom. Thinking it would be a good idea to give the officers a little fan service and hospitality to smooth things out, Roger invites the officers into the house. Harold, who's come over to the house to reveal that he's the one who called the police and to be nosy, also follows. Despite the fact that the door to the hall closet keeps mysteriously coming open, Roger is able to keep what really happened under wraps. Once the officers and Harold are gone, Roger returns inside to face a new dilemma. He noticed that his shotgun had gone missing just before the police and Harold left. Already sure of where to start looking, Roger grabs a weapon and opens the cracked closet door. The only thing he finds missing from inside is Sandy's body. The sound of a door closing to one of the rooms upstairs tells Roger that he's not alone. Going upstairs, Roger is once again led to his Aunt Elizabeth's room and is just in time to see the closet door shutting when he walks in. Moving in carefully toward the closet door, Roger isn't aware that the real threat is behind him. At least until it beans him in the head again with the butt end of his missing shotgun. Garbage Pail Sandy is still alive and well. She puts the barrel of the shotgun to Roger's head, taunts him, and then pulls the trigger. Nothing happens. It appears that Garbage Pail Sandy forgot to swipe some extra bullets to reload that gun with when she swiped it. A quick scuffle takes place with Garbage Pail Sandy having the upper hand. But Roger gets an idea and opens the door to his son's bedroom. The Ouija tools that had been closed inside earlier fly out and don't seem to have any bias as to who they hack up. They stab, impale, and behead Garbage Pail Sandy. Feeling victorious, Roger bags the body and carries it outside to bury it. Just as he's about to get started, though, he finds out that he has a guest in his pool. You remember that jogger from before? She's a swimmer, too. This is Tanya, played by Mary Staven, and she's there because herself and Roger's aunt had an agreement that Tanya could use the pool whenever she wanted. As Tanya and Roger make small talk, Garbage Pail Sandy proves that she doesn't need a little thing like a head attached to her body to keep operating. She tries to claw at Roger and then at Tanya. Roger manages to humorously keep the entire struggle hidden from Tanya. After the two say their goodbyes, Roger realizes that burying the body whole might not be a good idea, so he hacks the thing up into pieces and buries them all in the yard separately. However, later that night, Roger finds out that he's got a four-legged bandit on his property. The dog steals Garbage Pail Sandy's still-living hand and runs off into the night. Roger goes back into the house to look for his car keys so he can go chase after Muttley when someone knocks at the front door. It turns out to be Tanya, and she's got a little assignment for Roger. She was on her way out to a party and needs someone to babysit her little boy, Robert. Being the mother of the year that she is, Tanya has volunteered Roger, a man she just met hours ago, to do the job. But we find out that little Robert hasn't come to the house with just his mother. He's got a hitchhiker on his back. Roger sees and has to play a quick game of chase with Robert before he's able to catch him and get rid of Garbage Pail Sandy's hand by flushing it down the toilet. Don't ask how it fits down the toilet hole, it just does. Later that evening, once little Robert has been laid down for sleep, Roger is back at his story. Now we get to see some of what happened that was so traumatic that he couldn't even think about it before. While Roger and Ben were out on point, they got ambushed by the enemy. Ben is shot multiple times. That's all we get to see before Roger gets up and goes to check on little Robert. And it's a good thing he did too, because the boy is missing. Roger searches for him and gets upstairs just in time to see what looks like a Garbage Pail Kid of the female persuasion leading Robert into one of the rooms and shutting the door. Roger runs to the door, but is halted when it opens again, and a Garbage Pail Kid boy looks out, grins, and shuts the door again. Making it to the room, Roger is just in time to see Robert being shuttled up the chimney. Running to the fireplace, Roger engages in a tug-of-war for Robert against the two Garbage Pail Kids. It takes all of Roger's strength to wrestle Robert free. The occurrence doesn't seem to affect Robert at all. He plays in his bath with Roger afterward like everything is serene, and is a vision of normal once Tanya returns to collect him. With his little guest, well, at least the one that looks like a normal child, gone, Roger gets ready to try and catch the monster in the closet that clawed him up before. And since Harold is so full of nosy, Roger invites him over to witness it. However, Roger is sly. He tells Harold that the monster is actually a big raccoon, and that there's two of them, and that he needs help hunting them. Of course, Roger doesn't open the closet door until the stroke of midnight, and when he does, the raccoons come charging out. Roger fights against it while yelling at Harold to shoot it. Harold does, and the raccoons retreat. However, the rope attached to the harpoon snags Roger's foot and pulls him into the closet. Once inside, Roger finds himself not in the confines of the closet, but in the vast openness of the jungle. A jungle he's very familiar with. And there's someone else there. When Roger goes over to see who the fallen person is, he doesn't seem at all shocked to find that it's Ben. It's the same Ben from the earlier flashback, and he's still in wounded condition. He begs for Roger to finish him off as he knows he's dying. But Roger can't bring himself to off his best friend, and instead tells Ben that he will go to get help. That plan works about as well as a screen door on a submarine as enemy troops move in and abduct Ben. As he's dragged away, Ben screams out to Roger that he'll get him for this. Roger flees the jungle while under fire and goes back out the same way he was dragged in. Upon his exit, Roger finds himself back in the house with a passed out Harold. Whatever gateway he came out of is gone now, and the closet looks normal. Roger wakes Harold, who immediately starts swinging. For whatever reason, the gateway in the closet didn't appear for him, so the poor man has been waiting outside the closet for Roger's return with a bottle of liquid understanding for company. After their reunion, Roger escorts Harold back to his own house and puts him down to sleep off the liquor. Trying to make sense of everything, Roger takes a trip to the garage to look at his aunt's painting. He notices that there is a rag sitting on the painting and blocking what's underneath from view. When he removes the rag, Roger is shocked by what he sees. The image of Jimmy frozen in the bathroom mirror sends Roger back into the house to investigate, but when he opens the medicine cabinet, he sees that everything inside is normal. Getting an idea, Roger grabs something heavy from nearby and heaves it at the medicine cabinet mirror. When it shatters, it reveals another gateway. Before Roger can do any real checking of this new gateway, Tentacruel reaches out and attempts to pull him through. Roger manages to grab a nearby straight razor and shank Tentacruel back into the dark reaches of the gateway and get away to safety. When Roger hears Jimmy's voice calling for help from somewhere in that darkness though, he goes to get rope, his shotgun, and a flashlight. After tossing the rope into the abyss, Roger crawls through the bathroom mirror and into the gateway. All is eerily quiet in the darkness as Roger lowers himself down. But it was just a ploy, because in this abyss, there be creatures. Roger is a sitting duck against the flying skeleton beast. It steals his shotgun, gets distance, shoots the rope, and sends Roger tumbling down through darkness. Fortunately, Roger lands in a large body of water. When he sees bubbles coming from underneath that water, he goes under and attempts to find their source. When he surfaces again, Roger finds himself not in the darkness of the abyss, but in the jungle. He makes his way out of the water and onto the land, and that's when he sees a clearing with what happens to be a wooden cage and someone inside of it. But it's not just any someone, it's Jimmy. And it really is him this time. Overjoyed to see his father, Jimmy tells Roger that he wants to go home. The two share a quick heartfelt reunion before Jimmy warns Roger that he is coming back. Suddenly, Roger falls under gunfire. Quickly, he works the locks on the cage to open them and free Jimmy. The two escape into the water as a shadowy figure continues to fire upon them. When Roger and Jimmy resurface, they find themselves in the pool back at Aunt Elizabeth's house. Now, I have no idea why Roger and Jimmy leave the pool just to walk back into the house, just to turn around and walk right back out the front door. But once Roger opens that front door, he finds out that another surprise guest is ready to make his acquaintance. Ben has returned, undead, colorblind, and pissed off. Ben is still very bitter about Roger not killing him back in Vietnam. He tells Roger that he was tortured for weeks after being abducted by the enemy. Roger puts it together that it was Ben who was responsible for kidnapping Jimmy, and that he did it for revenge. But Ben doesn't want that now. He wants more. He wants the best friend who would have laid down his life for him to make true on those words, even if a little help is needed. Roger sends Jimmy for help while he deals with Ben. Roger quickly finds out that trying to hurt something that is already dead is pretty damn hard to do. Ben stalks Roger throughout the house, taunting him, knowing there's nothing his old friend can do to stop him. Even the house itself gets in on the chase. When Roger opens the doors to run, he finds the edge of a cliff on the other side with a raging ocean waiting below. With victory gleaming in his undead eyes, Ben steps on Roger's hands to force him to let go. Roger thinks fast and fashions his belt to use as a lasso. It latches around Ben's hand, and with one mighty pull, Roger sends Ben plummeting to the raging ocean below. Hearing Jimmy call for him, Roger climbs back into the house and goes in search. What he finds is that Ben isn't quite through yet. He has Jimmy, and he threatens to kill the boy if Roger won't kill himself. When Roger attempts to wrestle Jimmy from Ben, Ben takes a swipe at Roger with his knife. Roger is surprised to discover that the knife leaves no mark on him. But he quickly figures out the answer as to why. It's because he's not afraid anymore. He's not afraid of the house, and he's not afraid of Ben. Ben doesn't like this turn of events, and he tries to threaten Roger. Roger returns Ben's threat by snatching one of Ben's grenades, activating it, and shoving it into Ben's ribcage. He and Jimmy escape, while Ben is blown to pieces. Meanwhile, outside of the house, Sandy, the real one, arrives in a cab. Harold also wanders over, bought by the sound of the explosion. Both stare dumbfounded at the house, not sure what to think. That's when Roger and Jimmy make their exit, still safe and sound. Sandy can't believe her eyes and runs from the cab to Jimmy to hug her little boy. And Roger, with final victory his, smiles at seeing his family back together after so long. And that, ladies and gents, is House. And I'm not ashamed to say that this movie scared the living hell out of me when I first saw it as a kid. It stayed on my do not watch alone list for like a good 3 or 4 years after. I'm telling you, those monsters jacked me up, especially Garbage Pail Sandy. Then you have a kid in the movie who's been kidnapped by a monster, and if you were a kid, you're thinking the same thing could happen to you, and no, do not watch Alone List. But what I feel gives House its own little niche in that 80s horror genre is that it's not your typical haunted house movie where you have a malevolent spirit who's in the house raising hell against the people who are living in it. Instead, the house itself is the enemy. You see, we never get a full history of the place, so we don't know if someone actually built the house or if the house is a product of the hellish world it serves as a gateway to. What we do know is that the hellish world has an influence on the house, giving it life, so to speak, and allowing it to fashion a sort of personal hell for whoever it's focusing on, and exploit their darkest fears and deepest regrets. House was a success at its time of release, missing the #1 spot at the box office only because it was up against the cult classic Pretty in Pink, and it spawned not 1 but 3 sequels. House 2, the second story, was released in 1987, starring a new cast, a different house, and a plot completely unrelated to the first one. 1989's House 3, The Horror Show, is simply known as The Horror Show due to the producers of the film feeling that the film was too much horror when compared to House and House 2 and not enough comedy, so it was marketed as unrelated to the series, but is technically a part of it. And finally, House 4, The Repossession, released in 1992, which brings back Roger Cobb from the original House, but completely rewrites his history and family as if the first house never existed. So there's no son named Jimmy and there's no wife named Sandy. Like, that never happened. But House was written by Fred Decker, who will go on to write 2 cult classics of his own with Night of the Creeps in 1986 and The Monster Squad in 1987. Ethan Wiley, in his film debut as a writer, was brought in to add the comedy elements to the script. Sean S. Cunningham of Friday the 13th fame handled production of the film, and the man who will go on to play Jason the most times in the Friday the 13th franchise, Mr. Kane Hodder, was the film's stunt coordinator. And that's going to do it for this review. It was definitely long enough, right? I'd like to thank you all once again for joining me. I always appreciate it. Please feel free to comment. I always read them. And please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you feel so inclined. I'd love to have you. I've been your host of this crazy house, Paiper Zombie, and I'll see you next time.